Well, the fantasy genre is something that I'm very familiar with. There's a series that I recently picked back up that kind of spurred about the idea of making this video. And while there's a multitude of other series that I plan on getting to in video format, I figured why not start with something that's fresh in my mind. So without further ado, it's your boy Vil, aka Raygon Rencha. Kick your feet up, grab a snack, and it's time for me to ramble on about why I think Wistoria Wand and Sword is pretty darn good. Just as a precursor, I will be avoiding spoilers to the best of my ability, but I can't make any promises, so you're just gonna have to hold that. Sorry. So, without further ado, again, here we go. Our main character, Will, is a student at the Lindgarden Magic Academy. I could go on a very long-winded rant about each of the aspects that the academy focuses on to better the lives of people, but to simplify it, it's mostly just magic make life easier. Yes. 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 Magic make life easier. There is a very big elephant in the room, and you can probably guess, as it is with every shonen MC, there has to be some kind of negative trait that Will has, right? And what better trait would it be than to say, oh, I don't know, Will can't use magic. Will, amongst his peers, is known as a incompetent, or as the scholarship student, also known as a learner, where he pretty much got into the school via just brute forcing his way in through meathead tactics and just using pure knowledge. Now, I say meathead on the surface. While it's a very meatheaded approach, Will as a character is actually very, very smart and goes about each action that he takes in a very methodical and organized way that you probably wouldn't really see in other characters, or at least you wouldn't see done in the same way as other characters. Now, the story goes as followed. Both Will and his childhood friend Elfie aspire to become the Magia Vendi, or Supreme Wizards, in their world, which is pretty much the highest title that one could receive as a common person. Elfie, early on, shows very high promise and magic potency and talent, and is essentially shipped off to Lindgarden Academy to become Magia Vendi almost immediately. While Will, on the other hand, because he can't use magic, has to take a different route, and some would say this is not a very good route for a normal person to take, ranging from studying dungeons at the risk of his body becoming injured, fighting monsters at the risk of his body becoming injured, and doing every little bit to increase his physical prowess because he just doesn't have the ability to use magic, shapes Will into being like the ultimate combat machine for dealing with any type of monster that's within his range, of course, because there's always going to be somebody stronger, always going to be something stronger than you, which we come to find out later on in the series. But flash forward, Will, through all of his attempts, trials, errors, has finally managed to get into the academy, and sadly it wasn't through the use of discovering some super secret magical power that he had, but it was on a scholarship because he passed the written exam and was able to pretty much dust everybody in that written exam that they was like, oh well, okay, this guy's pretty smart, let's put him in the curriculum, see how he holds out. And another sad point is that this is like Will's 3rd to 5th year, I can't remember correctly, of being a scholarship student, which is essentially like it's his last year in which he could probably manage to become a Magia Vendi before all his doors shut in front of him. I think what makes Will's character interesting is that in the face of adversity, and like no matter how many times he gets knocked down, Will always finds a way to discern the path for himself. And I know that sounds very weird to say without like having any context behind it, but through the studying of monsters or analyzing his opponent's spells, Will somehow always finds a way to come out on top. Now, amongst the multitude of other students that Will is in class with or is in the same graduating year as, there are students that on paper, logically speaking, should be winning every contest against Will. But as you progress throughout the series and as you progress through each chapter, you start to realize that if you take magic into account, Will obviously just isn't up to par because he can't use it. But if you take everything else into account, be it knowledge, experience, adaptability to like any foregoing crisis that happens at a time, Will is leagues above all of his classmates. And it's very apparent in like one of the earlier chapters where in a dungeon where one of the top ranking students in his class or his graduating class, Theon or Shion, the translations are kind of weird for his name. I'm gonna just call him Theon. Theon, one of the top graduating students, is essentially fighting a monster that on paper he is inclined to be stronger than and can defeat with ease. But this monster is throwing Theon for a loop. He's nullifying all of his magic, pretty much knocking away everything that Theon throws at him, and Theon is panicking. Like this boy is in shambles. He's like, oh, he's avoiding my magic. He's nullifying my magic. And at a certain point, Theon just gives up. Like, he just resigns himself to the fact that he cannot defeat this monster, cannot win against a creature like this. And just as a note, this is like one of the bottom like creatures, not even really a strong one, but you know, for the graduating class, it's technically speaking a stronger creature. You know, power scaling and how they do that in the series, so on and so forth. And like clockwork, Will flashes in on the scene because he hears a classmate screaming for help. Within a few panels, you start to realize that Will is just so much stronger than all of his classmates. And it's not like in a obscene way where he doesn't belong, because obviously he belongs because he has to learn how to use magic at some point. We'll get into the details behind why he should have to learn magic, but that's for a different video at some point. But it's just within these few panels, you start to realize that through multiple forms of adversity and trial and error, Will as a character shows why he belongs in the academy, not because, you know, he's defeating the monster that Theon couldn't beat. A mage should be using like the environment. A mage should be able to recognize a weakness in their opponent, or all of the smaller, finer details that a warrior wouldn't. You know, a warrior should just be that, a warrior, somebody that's gonna clash swords with somebody and aim to just slice their opponent down, regardless of how many swings of their swords that it takes. But it's the reverse. Theon has the mindset of a warrior where he's just throwing his strongest spells at his opponent. It's not working. While when Will appears, he's essentially breaking down all the core pieces that this monster has in their arsenal. At a certain point, Will he's just like, I figured it out. You can't do anything to me anymore because I've figured out your gimmick, I figured out your pattern, I figured out your routine, everything, all the above. Like clockwork, Will defeats this monster right in front of Theon, and it's just like, it's mind-blowing. Now, I'm not gonna say mind-blowing as in like the super crazy way, but I'm gonna just say mind-blowing as in like, where somebody that's just seeing as incompetent is able to take on creatures and monsters to this degree, better than the wizards that are pretty much saying that they're better than him in every way, yet he's the only one that can defeat these monsters. Somebody that's just seen as incompetent is able to take on a monster of this caliber, at least this caliber for their power range, and defeat it with relative ease, while somebody that's at the top of their graduating class couldn't put a scratch on it. And this is all just within the first like 4 to 5 chapters that you start to get a very, very strong grasp of Will's character, and that while he is incompetent when it comes to using magic, he's leagues above everybody else in every other aspect, be it studying monsters, studying the patterns, or studying formulas behind why things work a certain way and how he can go about traversing that without his, you know, ability to use magic. And while it's not like groundbreaking or anything of the sort, I think what the series presents on the forefront of the fantasy genre as a whole, which sounds kind of odd because it sounds like I'm gassing it up way more than it should be. I think what this series presents is that regardless of your predicament that you're in, be it you're unable to use magic or unable to do something that somebody else is able to do pretty much effortlessly, there's always some form or way to find your own way of going about succeeding. And I know that sounds kind of cliche, and there's a bunch of other series that do it, but I just felt like I had to make this video on this series in particular just because I was reading it recently and it just kind of sparked the idea in my head, you know. While I don't think it's the most groundbreaking series, obviously, I definitely think it's worth the read just because on top of the character development that you see within Will and everything that follows after the events within the first few chapters, on how each character starts to change their opinion on Will, change their perspective and how they treat him, and recognize his worth as a person and as somebody that can't use magic, but always is there helping them defeat the monsters that they just can't seem to defeat. You start to appreciate this series outside of the vacuum that it's in. And, you know, again, there's other series that do this just as well, if not better. But because I've recently been reading the series, I just decided to make this video. This wasn't going to be a long video. I didn't mean to ramble. I just really enjoyed rereading this and catching up with what they had available at the moment. If you're interested, again, the series is called Wistoria, Wand and Sword. Feel free to check it out. It's available like everywhere. You can find it. If need be, I'll leave a link somewhere in the description or down in the comment section. But yeah, give it a read. It's fun. It's a fun series. It's been your boy Vel, aka Raygon Rencha. I hope this made sense. I hope this was a decent enough video. I want to try to make more manga based videos, but yeah, if you enjoyed this, leave a like, comment, subscribe. Let me know if there's any series you would want me to check out. I'm always down. I do read a lot as is already, so I mean, if you're telling me to check out something that I already read, I still will work on it, but you know, we'll see how it goes. But yeah, thanks for watching.